Never stop reading the Bible. Have you ever felt like you're just drowning in conflicting ideas? It seems like everywhere you turn, someone is trying to sell you a new version of the truth. Well, today, we're diving into a really old letter from the New Testament, the second letter of Peter, that has this surprisingly modern game plan for how to stay grounded.
So let's just start with the big question, the one this whole letter is built around. What is the absolute best way to defend yourself against bad ideas? How do you keep your footing when there's so much out there trying to pull you in a million different directions? This letter has a fascinating answer.
And here's what's really interesting. This letter wasn't written to warn about some enemy attacking from the outside. Nope. The real danger, the author says, was coming from inside the community. It was about false teachers, people who were part of the group, quietly chipping away at the truth.
So what's the solution? Well, Chapter 1 jumps straight into it. And instead of just listing a bunch of things to avoid, it lays out this proactive path of growth. The whole idea is that the best defense is a really strong offense, one you build yourself.
And this is that path. The author calls it a ladder of virtue, which is such a great visual, right? You can see yourself climbing it. But look at the very first step. It's knowledge. Everything else, self-control, perseverance, kindness, all the way up to love, is built on that foundation. A faith that's always growing is a faith that's hard to knock down.
And to make sure people know this isn't just some nice-sounding philosophy, the author makes this really bold claim. He says, hey, this isn't based on cleverly invented stories. He points to his own life, his own experience at the Transfiguration, saying, I was there, I was an eyewitness. He's rooting his entire message in reality, not myth.
Okay, so now that we have the positive game plan, Chapter 2 shifts gears. It's time to face the problem head-on. The author starts talking directly about these false teachers and exactly how they operate.
And this just lays out the contrast so clearly, doesn't it? On one side, you've got people pursuing virtue and knowledge, living holy lives. And on the other, you have these teachers who are all about secrecy, greed, and appealing to our worst instincts. It's a total clash of motivations.
Now, this letter does not mince words. The author is absolutely certain that these teachers are not going to get away with it. He says their destruction is coming and that divine justice is wide awake.
And to prove his point, he reaches back into history. He brings up three massive examples of divine judgment: the fallen angels, the world-altering flood in Noah's time, and the complete destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. He's saying, look, there is a clear historical pattern here.
This brings us to the final chapter, which is all about the main weapon the scoffers were using. They were basically pointing at the calendar, saying time is passing and using that to make people doubt everything.
And here's their big taunt. You can almost hear the sarcasm, right? So, where's this big coming you guys are always talking about? Everything looks exactly the same as it always has. They're using the normal, everyday passage of time as proof that the promise is a sham.
But the letter's response is just brilliant. It completely flips the script. The author argues that what looks like a delay from our perspective isn't a failure at all. It's actually an act of divine patience. It's mercy. It's giving more people more time to get things right.
And then he just shatters our whole concept of time with this famous idea that with the Lord, a single day can be like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years can be like a single day. The point is, you just can't measure God's timeline with your wristwatch.
So, the bottom line is this. No matter what the scoffers say, no matter how much time passes, that promised day of the Lord, it will come. It's an absolute certainty, and believers need to live their lives like they know it's coming.
So, what does this all mean for us right now? The letter ties everything together with a final, practical call to action. And you'll see, it brings us right back to where we started. The logic is actually really simple. Because that future is certain, it should change how you live today. If you know how the story ends, you should live in a way that prepares you for that ending. So the focus snaps right back to your own personal conduct, to living a holy and godly life.
Which brings us full circle, back to that first question. After all this, the path of virtue, the warning about deceit, the promise of what's to come, what is the final, ultimate defense against being led astray?
And there it is. The #1 defense against bad ideas isn't just having a good argument. It's about being in a state of constant active growth. The letter ends right where it began, telling us that the best way to stay strong, to avoid being fooled,
is to always be growing in grace and, crucially, in knowledge.
What a timeless message, right? The idea that personal growth and knowledge are your best anchor in a world of confusion. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer, which was based on analysis from the Center Studio.